All right, welcome to our evening Bible study. We're looking at the character of Joseph in the Bible. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 43. We're going to do a little bit of review and try to get moving. We've got so many chapters when it comes to Joseph. Overall, we know that Joseph is that young boy that was thrown into the well by his jealous brothers. His brothers sell him. He goes to Egypt. In Egypt, he is a slave in Potiphar's house. He prospers. God blesses him. His wife accuses him of rape. And then Potiphar puts him into prison. He's in prison for a number of years, total number of years between the time that he's taken into, sold off as a slave to the point where he stands before Pharaoh is approximately 13 years. Think about that, 13 years that he ends up spending basically as a slave. And then he is elevated to the level because he's able to interpret the dream, which is the idea that there is a famine coming, and he needs to plan for it by 7 years of prosperous crops, saving some of that portion, which ends up being a fifth, and then taking that and using it to help endure the 7 years of famine. So as he's implementing this, and we know it's about year one into the famine is when Jacob and back home, the famine is striking them pretty hard. So they need food. They send the brothers down, and the first encounter that they have with Joseph is he grills them about the idea that they're spies. And they just keep going on, no, we're not. He incarcerates him for 3 days, and then he comes up with a plan. I'm keeping Simeon. Simeon stays here. You can go back. And you're not going to get him back, and don't come back to Egypt until you bring that youngest brother. You told me that's alive. And that is really a very realistic request. If you want to prove that you're not a spy, you just told me some information. Now you need to validate it. You told me that you have a father and that you have a younger brother who's back home. His name's Benjamin. So, okay, I'm going to hold one brother hostage to prove. You proved now to me you're not a spy by going back and bringing that boy. That is almost not conniving, but if a ruler was really wanting to prove that these individual men coming there, who they say they are, then produce this brother. I kind of am amazed because we know that when they go home and they tell their dad just goes into grief. Not only now has he lost Joseph, but now he's lost Simeon, and that if he then sends Benjamin down, then that's 3 sons gone. That's the way Joseph was thinking. Another year goes by. So most Bible scholars believe we're like in year 2 of the famine because later on we know Joseph tells the brothers, he'll tell them, there's 5 more years. So we know it's year 2 is the second time. But the first time is year 1. They've eaten through all their food and now they come down. They go home and they don't want to go back. They don't want to go back because they know. And then finally Jacob says, look, you guys need to go get food in Egypt. And it's Judah who stands up and goes, look, no, we are not going if we don't bring Benjamin with us. The man treated us roughly. He threatened us and he said, look, if you do not show up with that brother, don't come back. Hello, Aline and Cindy. I'm sorry I didn't recognize or acknowledge you guys with us this evening. Hey, Lorenzo. If you don't mind, you guys move a little closer so they can hear on the microphone. I know they can't see you, so at least you got some. They can't see you, so you can make faces all you want. So they leave Simeon, and he's stuck down there, and they don't come back. And I've always thought just the fact that they took so long to go back. They're going back now only because they need grain. They're starving again. And this time, remember the first time when they first came back home and they tell Jacob about what's going on and Simeon being hostage. The idea is, well, let us just go back and get Simeon by taking Benjamin with us. And that's where Jacob's like, no, that's not going to happen. You're not going to do this. And then remember Reuben? Reuben pipes up and says, well, you can kill my kids if I don't come back with yours. And he goes, no, you're not. You're not doing that. That's that kind of impulsiveness that Reuben's like, yeah, you can just kill my kids. Yeah, I'm going to kill my grandkids. Can you imagine that? Okay, you don't come back with my son, but then you're going to, no. So that was an impulsive by Reuben. And then this time, when they're finally, Jacob saying, go down there, he reminds Dad. It's like saying, look, Dad, we told you this. If we go back down there, we have to take Benjamin. And so Jacob's back against the wall. We eat, by sinning and risking it, that's the only thing left. We all die, or we risk sending Benjamin back. And so he submits. Now, one of the instructions he gives to his sons is what? He tells them, first off, take the money that they had put back into your bags with you, and take money to buy the new grain for another year. And like I said, this is a huge caravan. This isn't just a couple of camels. You got 11 brothers, 10 brothers. Benjamin back home, and Joseph doesn't exist. So you got at least 10 brothers and servants that are going down in the caravan to haul all this grain back so to sustain them. So this is a big convoy that's going back again down there. So he's taking the gold, or whatever the payment was in that time, plus what they had found in their bags. And that's what's scaring them. The biggest thing is not only we have to face him down again, and the fact that what if something happens to Benjamin on the trip down? See, that was kind of one of Jacob's concern on the first trip was, we're not going to really let him out of my sight, because what if a camel trips and he falls down, and things happen like that. You could be injured. And he's so overprotective of Benjamin. So the fear that anything was to happen to Benjamin all the way down there and back, and then the fear that now we have to go and face him and tell him, oh, by the way, all the money that we supposedly paid for that grain, you didn't get it. It actually came back with us, came home. So they've got a lot to be a little on edge about just going down there. And so this is where we're at, is when they return back and they get there, and now they've got to face down this idea. Oh, Cindy, you're having little problems. Okay, well, I hope we get it straightened out. So, and again, if you're live with us, I hope that you will jump on, add comments, ask questions, and I do slow down times, and I do try to respond to them. So we started picking up in chapter Genesis 43, verse 2, just talking about the idea that they have to go back down, and he sends them down there. And like I said, the second reunion is going to be a very intense one. And so they take double money. That's what that's meaning in verse 15. They took this present. Do y'all remember what that present was? That present was basically dates, almonds. It was food. It was things that were unique to that area. That's when I made that little joke about, like when I go to Canaan and I take a gift, I take green chili. There's a man down there from Juarez that lives there and worships down there, and he loves green chili. So when I go down, guess what I take? I take something he can't get a hold of. And you think about it, I mean, they can't take any, there's not a lot, they're in a famine, but they do at least have something to present, and that's what they're going to do. And that's to try to appease. This, in other words, you can see this is a setup not to just go down and make a purchase and free the brother. It's a reconciliation between the government of Egypt through this governor as well by giving this present. And so there at the last verse, they go to Egypt and they stood before Joseph. And when Joseph saw Benjamin with him, he said to the steward of his house, bring the men into the house and slaughter an animal and make ready for the men or to dine with me at noon. Now the servant doesn't tell Joseph's brothers that they're going to the house to eat. He just says, the governor wants you at his house. And they are spooked. They are afraid because they believe that it's a setup, and that's exactly what they say, is this idea that, this must be something that he's going to jump, he's going to attack us, basically. And they were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house, and they said it's because of the money which was replaced in our sacks the first time that we are brought in, so they may assault us and fall on us and make us servants and seize our donkeys. So they're kind of self-inflicting this anxiety, aren't they? They're just, and rightfully so. I mean, we know that they've been battling this guilty conscience. Egypt to them has just been eating at them ever since the first time that their father said, you need to go to Egypt. Remember what it said? It said they looked at each other. and Jacob said, because Jacob goes, what are you looking at? Go to Egypt. And they're like, oh, we got some skeletons in our closet down in Egypt. So we know that this reconciliation is something that they're just being torn apart emotionally, that they're battling with. And so 19 through 21, and so they went to the steward of Joseph's house and spoke to him at the door of the house and said, "Oh, my Lord, we came down the first time to buy food, and when we came to the lodging place, we opened our sacks, and there was each man's money in the mouth of his sack. Our money is in full weight, so we have brought it here again with us." So first thing, they're already afraid, so they go to the steward, not Joseph yet, because it's kind of like, well, we can't get to him, but can you kind of tell us, can we get some information? But let me explain first before we get enslaved and you attack us. But we had no idea that was going on. What's that?
I have down that the steward was the Holy Spirit.
I don't know where that is.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I've never heard that the steward is the Holy Spirit.
Right, because when you look at 42 and 28, it says, "What is this that God has done to us?" That's the reference that I have.
Okay, that's what they do say, because that's what they're going to say. Well, if you look, I think it's a real steward, because Joseph instructed the steward to bring them. So it's a servant of Joseph. So what he's basically saying is, we've brought the money back, but we've also brought money that we're going to purchase. We need more grain again. Again, one of my thoughts would have been, why are you just now showing back up just to purchase grain? Didn't you care about your brother, Simeon? What took you so long to come back? It's over a year. And now you show up, and now you're going to give me this concocted story about how, the money was in your bags. This could have gone bad, but I love the way the servant, and I don't know if he was instructed. Now this might be what you're saying, Becky, that through the Spirit, speaking through this servant, maybe guided somehow this message. He said, "We brought the money down with us to buy food." So he has both. "We do not know who put the money in our sacks." And he replied, "Peace to you, be not afraid. Your God and the God of your fathers has put treasure in your sacks for you. I received your money." That does seem to be that way. The only thing is, the thing that fascinates me is, remember, we're talking about Egyptians who do not like the Semites. They do not like people from the land of Canaan. They're very, very harsh against anybody who's from Canaan because of they call them the shepherd pharaohs, the Hyksos pharaohs. And so to me, when you say you're God, it's almost like, why would this pagan Egyptian God-worshiping steward be evoked to say you're God? Because one, they don't associate, they don't hang out with each other, so the Egyptians and the Semites would be apart. And I looked at that in the Hebrew, and that God is not, it's more of a recognition of saying, like, you're God, you're gods. It can be plural and not necessarily Yahweh God, so it is a variation of it. So I think he's kind of saying, well, your God of your religion has taken care of you because it's there, the money's there. Either way, it is a great message, and it would still, you notice there's no follow-up now, just because it's probably not as important, but after he said, "I've received your money," it's probably referring to the fact that, yes, we got your money. You've already given it to us. We're square. Not the fact that somehow we miraculously have already received it and now you're bringing double money back. But I think the steward is basically saying, you've already made it good. We got your money. So as far as that first grain deal, we're okay. And then the steward brings Simeon out. Now, the steward wouldn't bring him out if Joseph hadn't given some more instruction than what we initially read. The only thing we have is that when he first sees his brother, Benjamin, he says, "Prepare a new meal." But we can tell by looking at this encounter, there's a little bit more that must have been told the steward to go ahead and do, because why would he bring Simeon out? There would be no motivation for the steward outside of somebody telling him. So that's a relief, isn't it? Two of the big things that they were so struggling with over on this whole journey was, are we going to get Simeon back? Is Simeon okay? And how are we going to reconcile this money? And the steward solved it. Because he said, nope, got your money? Here's your brother. Benjamin's there. So it's almost like, whew, but it's not over, is it? And so he goes ahead in verse 24. And when the man had brought the men into Joseph's house and given them water, and they washed their feet, and when they had given their donkeys fodder, they prepared the present for Joseph's coming at noon, for they heard that they were going to eat bread there. So they initially didn't know why they were going there, but when they did receive, they had this conversation with the steward. The steward tells them, don't worry, here's your brother, we got your money, and then gives them fantastic hospitality. He's taking care of them, wash their feet, cleanliness. One thing with the Egyptians they were fanatics about cleaning. They were very cleanly. That's one of the evidences about when they brought Joseph up out of the prison. If it was one of what they call the shepherd pharaohs, they had facial hair. They didn't care. But when they brought him out, you can tell it's an Egyptian pharaoh because you don't present somebody that's got facial hair. And so here you can see as well, they're letting them prepare themselves because they're going to be in the guests as guests of the governor of Egypt. They're calling him Pharaoh, ruler of Egypt. And even their animals, they're caring for their animals as well. And so what do the brothers do? They present, they get their present ready to give to him, and they know he's coming at noon. There must have been some relief and some anxiety while they're waiting. And also looking around. Now imagine, if you were to go to the governor's palace of a state, go to the governor's mansion in New Mexico, or go to the governor's mansion in any state, and you were just in an area where you're going to have a meal, there's just something about being in that setting, and it's intimidating. And a lot of times, it's used that way in a sense of intimidation. VIPs sometimes are brought in certain areas strategically. If you look at the history of the architecture of Washington, D.C., they will tell you that the way it's designed is to, in a sense, evoke power so that when dignitaries and people are coming from around the world, that what they see, it's psychologically is supposed to set this idea of this powerful government and everything. So I can envision them sitting there in this, if he's next to Pharaoh, his residence is pretty sweet. And while they're sitting there waiting for this most powerful man to come in, they're feeling a little at ease, but they're never going to feel very comfortable. Remember, what do they live in? They live in tents. They're nomadic. So they're way out of their league in a lot of ways as they're sitting there waiting. So when Joseph come home, they brought him into the house. They brought into the house to him the present that they had with them, and they bowed down to him on the ground. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? This is not the first time, but remember that dream? Whenever they ridiculed him so harshly? And even Jacob, his dad said, well, boy, are you saying that even me and your mom, we're all going to bow down to you? And the first trip, what they do? They bowed down to him. Very first time here, they're bowing down to him. And they're going to bow down to him again. So this afternoon, just before class, I thought of this show. It's called Undercover Boss. Have you ever seen that? Where like the CEO of IBM or Microsoft will go down and work in some store or on the floor. Nobody knows that he's the boss. And isn't it crazy to sit there and go, and as we're watching it, you're going, this is the boss. Do you hear the way that guy talks? Does he realize who he's talking to? And this is kind of the other way. We're seeing that we know who Joseph is, and the brothers don't. And so this is one of the beautiful aspects, I think, of this story, is that we're watching this drama play out and how Joseph has to maintain cover. And I watched a few of those shows, and you can tell that a lot of times on that Undercover Boss show, it's hard for the bosses not to stop. Occasionally, I think one time, the boss finally revealed himself and fired the manager. He just showed himself. He goes, you know what? I'm the president of this company. You're fired, dude. You don't treat people this way. So, but he has to maintain cover. And emotionally, after, we're looking at, I added up, if you look at 13 years as a prisoner, and then another 7 years of the plentiful years, and then you add another 2 years, a year into the famine, and now we're assuming that as soon as he stood before Pharaoh, if we assume that he's 30 years old, that immediately that season was a bountiful year. But we're not told that. It could have been another year or two. Remember, he's got to start building an infrastructure. He's got to organize a government to start to receive all this. So it's highly probable that it's at least 21 years that he has not seen his brothers. He's got his sons named after different issues that he has emotionally, about the agony of living alone, and he never went home. We brought that up, remember? As soon as he was put into power, you thought that he had told Pharaoh, hey, I got to take a little road trip. I need about 50 soldiers. I got a meeting with my brothers I need to go home and settle a score with. He doesn't. But emotionally, you cannot repress it. So I think he's got a little bit of a vengeance. You can see in the way he's handling this. There's a little bit of that getting back at his brothers. And I read one article, one writer talking about it, and I kind of think I can see what they're saying, and I can believe this, but there's nothing necessarily scripturally to support it. But one of the plans that Joseph could have here is to get Benjamin away from his brothers. His father was 80 years old when he was born. You notice he keeps asking. He goes, "Is my father alive? Is your father alive?" Because he's pushing 100. And if his father's dead, oh man, who's protecting Benjamin? And he knows how they treated him. That's his last memory, being constantly ridiculed, made fun of, and then finally thrown into a well and sold as a slave. What are they going to do to Benjamin when dad's gone? So there's this idea that it's possible that his whole thing is to get Benjamin into Egypt and get him away from his brothers. And it does kind of fit. Why is he so persistent about getting Benjamin, bringing Benjamin down? And you mentioned, John, about the idea that he sees, even Jacob looks at and talks as if, that Benjamin has no brothers, right? He has no brother. Yeah, he's got 10 others. Because that's the way Jacob was kind of looking at his family. It was fragmented by the mothers. So I think this is something we see possibly going on, where Joseph's plan is going one direction, but I think we'll see his spirit is going to move him in a little different direction and keep him from possibly following through the way he may have wanted to. Because there's some expressions we'll see that it's like as if he has these epiphanies and realizations as the things are happening. And so in verse 27, he inquired about their welfare. And is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he alive? This is where you can see if he was so bent on just total revenge, the first time he saw him, he would have imprisoned him, beat him, and executed him. He had the full power to do so. But is your father okay? Is he still alive? I don't know if one of them's sitting there, but if you started to put a lot of these little things that this Pharaoh is telling you and asking you about, they seem a little weirdly personal. But I think they're spread out enough to where Joseph isn't revealing himself totally, but he sure is inquisitive about our family, wanting to know. And they said, your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive. And they bowed their heads and prostrated themselves. That's the second time. There's two different words here. One's bow, and that's initial, and this prostrate. This is a much more humiliating, I say humiliating, but in honor, that word there, and presenting themselves before him. And it's kind of interesting that that's mixed with the idea of now we're talking family in that question, and now the brothers are even more humbled by them talking. And he lifted up his eyes, and he saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son. Notice that. Same type of thing, right, John? We talk about there seems to be this connection that's why I said I can really see where Joseph is like, I'm going to get my little brother and I'm going to get him away from you guys. His first question, is Dad alive? He knows Benjamin's alive. He's already seen him earlier. His plan for revenge is shifting. Because now Dad's alive, so that means if he did go back, Dad's at least going to take care of him. But he's really old, and if he does die, and I'm not going to leave him there with those guys. And so he looks at his brother, his mother's son, not these stepbrothers, is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me? God be gracious to you, my son. He is speaking, like I told you, you got to think about this. Joseph is Egyptian, other than his blood. From the age of 17 to nearly 40, he has been in Egypt. He has been educated. He's been speaking the language. He has faked it, and that he doesn't understand what they're saying. He's used an interpreter and played dumb, and he's speaking through an interpreter still, so they have no clue. And this idea again about the God, he's playing the role as if he's Egyptian and like, your God be gracious, Because he'll use the word, later on we're going to see where he plays a game with his cup. And he tells them, he goes, do you not know that I can look at the future in it? Divination? And he's not into that. But he knows that that's the Orientals, a lot of the pagans, they would use the ruler's cup to look into it. So he knows all the culture, and he's like, this is a part of that facade he's throwing up to let them think he's Egyptian. But he can't hide. That's the one thing, is he has so much hurt buried and loneliness, and then Joseph hurried out, for his compassion grew warm for his brother. Not them, so he never cried about them. And he sought a place to weep, and he entered his chamber and wept there. And he washed his face, and he came out, and controlling himself, he said, serve the food. If you're, you may not know somebody, but a lot of times when you're in their presence, you're talking like this, you can sense someone's getting emotional. Something in their disposition will start to change. You can tell a lot of times they're getting emotional. And while they're engaging in this conversation, he's looking at Benjamin and becomes emotional and departs the room. Where'd he go? What? If you're the brothers, you're sitting there going, what's going on? And he comes back, and there has to be a little bit of that, I wonder if he's got an upset stomach or a headache or what's going on. There's something that would still give off that there's something, but it's still, they're too much out of their element. So he just comes in, controls himself, says, let's eat. Now, this is what's fascinating, the way he sets it up. Now, first off, the way the Egyptians ate, their tables were small. 3 to 4 people would sit at a table, and they would organize it according to military rank or power in that order. So, and then the dignitary, Joseph himself, would sit at his own table. That's just the way it would be. Now, there's another layer to this. You have Semitic Jews, they're not called Jews then, but you have these Hebrews, shepherd people, and Egyptians. They cannot eat together. They can't share food off the same. You can't pass a plate of chicken over to them and then them eat off the plate. They have to have their own tray of food to eat off with the Hebrews, and then the Egyptians would eat off theirs. What's that?
Samaritans.
Exactly. The Egyptians are treating the Hebrews like the Samaritans. And this is what's fat. This catches their eye. And they served him by himself, and them by themselves, you see. So that's that separation. And the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. This is also, kind of a side note, another supporting point, that this is an Egyptian Pharaoh, not one of what they call the sheep kings or the Hyksos pharaohs who came from Canaan and ruled for a certain period of time. Because this is after. And this is why they detest anybody who was from the Canaan region. because of what they did to their country. You know that we still have that? Do you know why coffee is predominant and not tea? There's a question. It goes back to the English and the Revolution. Remember the Boston Tea Party? And did you know that that's why we have coffee is predominant, the most popular drink, because we would not drink tea? Americans in the colonies would not drink tea. Why? Because of the British. You know, the spelling of our words even are not the same because that's the way the English spelled their words. There's a lot of things because of our relationship with that oppressive English king created us. And that's what we see here. And that's why I think it supports this idea that this is an Egyptian pharaoh, not one of the ones that they've tried to date. And it changes the dates. That's why I keep bringing this up, because when you do this, it changes the timelines, which gets a little, if you start studying, you're going to find there's different theories on this. And I'm just really driven that this is not, they've got the wrong timeline, some people. So we know it's an abomination. So they're ordered appropriately. We have first Pharaoh or Joseph eat by himself, the Hebrews eat by themselves, and the Egyptians eat by themselves. And apparently there are 3 to 4 people at a table. And then even within that small little table, they were ordered in a certain way of seniority or power. And that's what's going to catch the brothers' eyes. Watch. And they set before them the firstborn according to his birthright and the youngest according to his birthright. And the men looked at one another in amazement. How does he know this? I mean, we can't even get their birthright. I mean, you know, I sit there and talk. We were talking about it last week, you know, after class. It was like, wait, Simeon's the oldest. You know, wait, who's the oldest? You know, it's like, and then so here you have a pharaoh. You're in a foreign country. And when you sit down, they place you exactly the way your birth order is. And that's why they're looking around going, did you tell them? Did they ask you what our birth order was? So that's another little subtle hint. There's these little bitty things that Joseph has exposed, but they're again so overwhelmed with guilt and everything that it's just plain in. And remember, the ebb and flow of their emotions. First conflict, Stuart puts them at ease. Then they come before Pharaoh. Call him Pharaoh because they call him Pharaoh, but they come before Joseph, and then he puts them a little at ease, but they're still not totally comfortable. But then they sit down to eat, and then they look around, and they're ordered in a very peculiar way. They're not surprised with them being separated. This is not a cultural thing that all of a sudden goes, wow, they're so prejudiced, these Egyptians. No, they've known this. This is nothing. Now, this is another custom of showing honor in verse 34. And portions were taken out to them from Joseph's table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as any of theirs. And they drank and they were merry with him. Another one of those little things, huh? You wanted this brother of ours. You kept talking about this brother of ours. We brought the brother down, and now you're showing him all this favor. How would you feel? How would that make you feel? What would you think that if all of a sudden that little brother, and remember, aren't you a little bit on edge about everything he does? I mean, if Benjamin tripped and broke his arm, or anything happened to Benjamin while you're on your trip, especially if you're Judah, if I was Judah, I'd be sitting there right by that boy going, you ain't getting out of my sight. And then I would be very nervous if the governor was paying special attention to him. No, that would not make me feel comfortable at all. Just forget about him.
Make it very apparent. It wasn't just double portions, it was 5 times.
5 times. And it's coming off Joseph's plate. That is very, very unusual for the senior person or Pharaoh to give food off their plate to somebody is something very, very exceptional. But then to give him 5 times. If I was Judah, I would be going, oh man, we're in trouble. If he kept Simeon, And he's liking this boy. Don't like him. Please, just ignore, forget about Benjamin, And so it has to be, and I believe that this is absolutely deliberate. This is a little of that revenge of organizing them the way they're going to eat, and them not know how would they know, and then to turn around and then giving this special, knowing that special relationship that Joseph had with his father, he knows Benjamin has it with his father. And there must be something. And these other brothers have always probably been a little divisive against these two brothers all along. Even back when Joseph was growing up at 17 years of age, has seen this type of prejudice given towards them as brothers, because their mother was a favorite and the other brothers' mothers were not favorite, or Jacob didn't even love them. And now it's right the opposite. Look at the honors coming upon him. But now look what it says there. This is where they come at ease. And they drank and they were merry with him. One thing that you have to always be careful about, especially with people in power like this, they've got an end game. People who rise to these levels, they are thinking 5 steps ahead of you a lot of times. When I was a general's aide, I saw this all the time with the governor and senators, and I would sit back and watch this stuff go on. And I'm telling you, there's nothing that's haphazard. Everything is methodical. And they're thinking 5 steps ahead. Because we would go into different social events or go to certain things, and I'm just a servant, helping out, get things, make sure we get going and do this stuff. And then we would be traveling, and it would just be me and the general would sit there and just tell me some stuff. I'm going, how did you figure that out? And he would already know what was going on, because he was able to think and not be caught up in the event. And one thing I learned, never relax around these people. Don't get comfortable, because they're still in game form. They never let down. And that's what I think's happened, is like, whew, all right, boys. Whew, we made it, man. We're okay. And I think Joseph's playing them. I think Joseph's playing them, putting them at ease, because guess what's he going to do? You guys aren't done. I'm not done with you yet. So they depart for the evening, and then so he tells his steward, he commands the steward of his house, fill them in sacks with food, as much as they can carry. Now let's stop. Those are provisions. They're going to have grain. So those sacks are going to be full with grain already. That's a given. So he's giving him an instruction to also put food for the trip. So there's a providence. There's a thing where he's taking care of them. But put each man's money back in the mouth of the sack, and put my cup, the silver cup. Now he's very specific. This, not any cup, because I'm sure he drinks of a bunch, but this is the royal cup. Put that one in the youngest with the grain, the money for grain. Now they're going back with double the money, food to eat, and then the Pharaoh's cup. It just, and then I thought to myself, if I got up that morning and I was Judah and I was Reuben, I'd say, guys, check your sacks. Why? It's happened to us before, and we never found out. Nobody had ever told them, oh, by the way, I put those in your sacks, and so, if you haven't figured it out, and the last time you left, you ended up with that money, I would say, let's shake down the equipment. You do that in the military. You check your load, man. Make sure you know what you got going. I would have been, if I was Judah or Simeon, the older brother, I'd say, open the sacks, boys. Let's go through and let's make sure we're going home with what we need, and that's it. I don't know. I think a little too much relaxing. They figure all is good, nothing's going to happen. And it's not good, is it? And so they did as he told them. And as soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away with their donkeys. And when they had only gone a short distance from the city, now Joseph said to the steward, now up, follow after the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, why have you repaid evil for good? It is it not from my Lord drinks? In other words, this cup, and by this that he practices divination? So he's telling them to tell them, you've taken my Lord's cup that he looks into the future. He runs the nation by. This isn't just silverware off the table. This is like grabbing something very important from a ruler that he uses to govern. You have done evil in this doing. When he overtook them, he spoke these words to them. So he did what he said. So those were instructions that he was saying, when you catch him, this is what I want you to tell him. And they said to him, why does my Lord speak such words as these? Far be it from your servants to do such a thing. Behold, the money we found in the mouths of our sacks, we brought back to you from the land of Canaan. How could we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? That's a logical statement. Why would we risk coming back, giving you money, and then turn around and then take it back again? It truly is illogical. It doesn't make sense that you would do that. Why? Now we're buddies with Pharaoh, the ruler. We're buddies with him. Why? Now, no, this doesn't make sense. So, whichever one of your servants is found with it shall die. And we also will be the Lord's servants. Ooh, that sounds like a Reuben statement. Remember, Reuben's the one that said, you can kill my sons if I don't show back up here with Simeon. Watch what you say. This is about those vows again. Be careful. So, if you find them, you can kill them. That's how cocky and confident they are that they're fine. And he said, let it be as you say. He who is found with it will be my servant, and the rest you shall be innocent. Whichever your servant is found with it shall die, and we also will be my Lord's servants. And he said, let it be as you may, who is found with my servant, and let the rest of you be innocent. Then each man quickly lowered his sack to the ground, and each man opened his sack, searched the beginning with the eldest and ending with the youngest. And the cup was found, guess where? Benjamin. What's that?
I don't like what he did.
You don't like it? Why? Cruel?
I mean, he went too far. You remember Judah vowed to Jacob, like, kill me if I don't bring this boy back. You just want to make some people, just want to kill them. He went just too far.
And I think that the thing that kind of catches them is the fact that they go too far in making such a brash statement of saying, you're willing to sacrifice, if you're wrong, one of your brothers. I don't know that I could say we'll be your slaves, but for me to be as bold to say, and if you find it in my brother's sack, kill him. I don't. So they find it. And of course, they tear their clothes, and every man loaded his donkey, and they returned to the city. When Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, he was still there. I wonder why. He's waiting for him. He knows. And they fell to the ground. They fell to him to the ground. And Joseph said, what deed is this that you have done? Do you not know that a man like me indeed practiced divination? Does he really? No, he doesn't. But he's showing, he's just ratcheting it up, isn't he? Ratcheting it up. And that's what I mean. I think this plan of his was going the way he wanted, because now he was going to be fully justified in keeping Benjamin. Right? Perfect. The plan was going to happen. If, like what I was saying, if that was, the proposition was the idea that his whole plan was to terrorize his brothers and get Benjamin away from them, then he plants what? The cup in Benjamin. So now he can say, it's legal, man. You said it. So now, guess what? He's my servant. And you can go home. And so there's a part I think that's where he wanted this to go, was basically, I'm going to keep him, you can go. Notice that's what he said, you can go, but I'm keeping Benjamin. And Joseph said to them, that's such a setup. And this is where Judah, I know we're really running out of time, but this is where I think Judah steps up. And it was a good thing Reuben didn't. But Judah has a lot, because he's made an oath to his father that I'm going to bring him back. He mentions his father 15 times. I counted them. 15 times Judah refers back to his father, back to his father. I think that's the golden word that cracks Joseph. I think this is where Joseph's plan, if it was that, changes. And Judah said, what shall we say, my Lord? What shall we speak? How can we clear ourselves? Now, this is something that I read, some scholars were saying, these are fragmented sentences. What shall we say, my Lord? What can we say? What can we speak? How can we clear ourselves? Judah's emotion is like, he's so overwhelmed that these statements are kind of reflecting that kind of a thought and emotion. Like, what can we say? What can we how do we clear ourselves? It's just, and then he settles in. And he starts to then bring forward, kind of clears himself. He says, God has found out our guilt of your servants. See, this is why I do not think Joseph expected this confession, this level of an intercession. And looking at Judah and the way that it has shook him, and like, a lot of times revenge is sweet until you inflict it. And then you look at what you've done. And I think a little of this as well. And the fact of his confession. And that God is the one, he recognizes, Judah is confessing that it's God is getting us for this, our guilt. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and he also who is in the hand, the cup has been found, Benjamin. And he said, far be it from me that I should do so, only the man whose hand the cup was found shall be my servant. But as for you, you go in peace to your father. Okay, you're right. You can't say anything, Judah. There's nothing you're going to be able to clear yourself with. But you're going to live. We'll let you guys go on. Take your grain. But Benjamin, that young man that we found it on, he's going to stay. Then Judah goes up to him. Oh, my Lord, please let your servant speak a word in my Lord's ear. And let not your anger burn against your servant, for you are like Pharaoh himself. My Lord asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a younger brother, and a child of old age. His brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother's children, and his father loves him. When you said to your servants, bring him down, that I may set my eyes on him, we said, my Lord, the boy cannot leave his father, for if we leave his father would die. Then you said to your servants, unless your brother, I'm sorry, that's redundant. And then the father said, go again, buy us a little food. We said, we cannot go down, for our youngest brother goes with us. Then we will go down, for we cannot see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. Now, therefore, as soon as I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, as his life is bound up in the boy's life, as soon as he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. And your servants will bring down the gray hairs of your servant, our father, with sorrow to Sheol. For your servant became a pledge of safety for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father in all my life. Now, therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a servant to my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father. I can't let this happen. Don't get angry, but I just can't let this happen, he's saying. And this is where I think listening, watching his brothers, seeing Benjamin, this is all emotionally washing over him and just kind of, I think, opens up a little softer path.
Well, I think Joseph is thinking that they need to have some guilt for what they've done.
He confesses, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Judah says, we're wrong. And, it's like I said, how many times he goes to his dad. He talks about the father. And that if we don't come back with him, your plan is to keep him. But you know what? Your plan's going to do. If he's sitting there thinking about this, the necessary conclusion would be, if I keep Benjamin and get him away from you guys, I kill my father. And I don't want that. And then seeing the way they respond. That's why I think this little intercession is so amazing, is what helped shift him over. Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood. He cried and made everybody go out from me. So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud so that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. And Joseph said to his brother, I am Joseph. Is my father alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. He spoke in Hebrew. I am Joseph. No interpreter. He ran everybody out. All this time he's been going through an interpreter, and all of a sudden he cries and throws everybody out. And then says, I am Joseph. And they're just sitting there going, oh, you could just imagine them just, they probably couldn't comprehend what was going on. And look what his next statement is. Joseph, what does he ask? Is my father alive? That's why I think Jacob is what helped change Joseph from following through with keeping Benjamin and just sending the boys back and keeping himself hid in history as a ruler of Egypt. Because remember, he was sitting on top of the world. And he does so for another 70 years after this. He continues in this. So his brothers are dismayed at his presence. Now think of that. Because they're sitting there going, now wait a minute. Joseph, last time we saw him, had that multicolored coat. We whooped on him. We threw him. We sold him. It's been over 21 years since we've seen him. So this could be him. Now that, and I'll tell you what, if you haven't seen somebody in a long time, there's a lot of times I especially living here in Las Cruces, where I haven't seen people in 20 years. And it takes just a little bit. But once they tell me, well, I went to high school with them. My name's Bob. And I look in their eyes and I'm like, oh, you are. It's the eyes. Have you had that experience? You see somebody and their kind of demeanor or something about them has changed and you haven't seen them so long. But as soon as they say, I'm Ron, and you see their eyes, the eyes don't change.
That happened to me, and the person said, you don't know who I am? And I said, no. And so then I said, well, speak to me again, because they had a different voice. So this person kept talking, and I went, wow.
That's this
But I
moment.
had seen this person for 6 months and not knew that it was the person till they told me who they were. They thought I was ignoring them.
So can you imagine the brothers?
But Joseph didn't, look who I am. I can do anything I wanted with you. I mean, he's not sitting there.
This is the most beautiful, what you just brought up, Becky, is probably the most beautiful aspect of Joseph's character. Is it no matter how bad life had treated him, God was blessing him. God never told him, just like with Job. God never told him and sent him little text messages or Twitter messages and saying, hey, it's okay, man. It's good. You're going to be in prison so long. It's okay. No, he lived by faith, didn't he? And every time faith would guide him a certain way and it looked like it was going good, guess what? Bam, something bad would happen. He lived by faith. The triumph of faith. And the character that sustained itself. He didn't, yes, externally, culturally, he became Egyptian. But spiritually, no.
He did that to survive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, he had to fit in, yeah. I mean, he had nothing else anymore, right? He had no family. The name of his children kind of identified that he'd given up on his heritage, you know. So I just imagine, this statement right here, I am Joseph, is my father alive? And they're just trying to comprehend and compute that, and then it's like, Father? So,
Our Father you're talking about, you're asking about our...
we have the same Father? They couldn't answer him. For why? They were dismayed at his presence. You're Egyptian. You're like Pharaoh. We're Hebrew. So yeah, that would have been the most overwhelming. And he said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But they couldn't answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph said to his brothers, come near to me, please. Look at that. Look at that. He didn't command them. It's almost like they're wanting to stay back. It's like, and he's like, come closer, guys. Come on. This is a little boy that was treated so bad. Come near to me. And they came near, and he said, this is the third time. I am your brother Joseph. Oh, and he had to add this, whom you sold into Egypt.
Remember that?
Little jab, right?
But it was a tidbit of information.
True.
That, yeah.
You know what? That is very true. That's a good way of confirming it, right? Because you notice that every time they referred to Joseph in the past, it wasn't Joseph by name. It wasn't how he disappeared. It was, he used to have a brother. Remember that? So you're right. That is good. I kind of saw it as another little poke, but it's actually a confirmation. I am Joseph, the one you sold to Egypt. So now they're like, oh, how does he know that? And then it all comes together. How did he know the birth order? How did he place us in order? How did this, and then it's Benjamin he showed all the favoritism to. His brother. So it just kind of just explodes emotionally. You can just feel the emotional just being poured out. And now this is where I think it dawned on him, that dream and the plan that God has had all along. And do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. And the famine has been in these lands 2 years. There's that timeline, see, we can tell. And there are 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors, so it is not you who sent me, but God. And he made me a father to Pharaoh, and the Lord of his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Well, we'll kind of wrap up next week on this, because I feel like we have to do a fast overview, but we want to end on how they end before we go to Moses, because we know it goes bad. But we know they always have some guilt, even beyond this reconciliation, because when their dad dies, when Jacob dies, they come to him going, oh, are you going to get revenge now? They're still on edge. It's like their guilt is still haunting them. But look what he says. God is the one. Don't blame yourself. It's not you. It's God. How did he come up with that? This is where I think it's providential and it's kind of spirit-led. This answer, this realization has come to him, that like the way that he was able to interpret dreams. I think this is something that God at that moment then helped to enlighten, or him be able to pull it all together. Remember, it was a prophecy that was handed down from Abraham. This is something that would have been taught to Isaac, and then taught to Jacob, and then Jacob to his children, that there was this prophecy that Abraham's descendants would go to a foreign land, spend 400-something years, and then come out and go to the promised land. So, and there's a whole sermon series there, isn't there? Many things happen because people think it's bad, but yet God turns it. And that is probably, I think, also one of the great lessons, is that many times people who try to inflict bad on us, actually, it turns out to be the most beautiful thing, because God can take many times stupid things I'll do and just still turn it into a beautiful way of fulfilling his promise in spite of me. and teach me and teach those boys and still fulfill his promise to Abraham. So wrap your mind around all that. That's the class.
One thing I always take out from Joseph's life story is when the wife of, what's the name of the man who bought him, when he sold him to Potiphar. When Potiphar's wife was trying to sleep with him, I think from childhood I always think about that, like I am on a spiritual journey. If he had succumbed to that woman, all these dreams would have died. Like he wouldn't have been able to get to where he was going. So he kept on trying to not be with a woman. That landed him to the prison and landed him in Pharaoh's court. Otherwise, he would have remained with a woman and probably thinking he's enjoying life. I'm trying to marry what happened to him to what happened to some of our young ones in real life today. We get swayed away by something we think it's, oh, fun, let me have fun, at least just for once, just for some time, not knowing that there is a plan for your life, like just keep on. But if you break it, you're not going to get to where you're supposed to get to. It's not like you're living your half potential instead of living the fullest and saving other people whose destiny God has placed in your hand. So you end up killing yourself and killing the lives of other people.
And that's exactly what sin does. You know, sin is so devastating that we don't see the ripple effect. That, like you said, that if he would have had that relationship with Potiphar's wife at any moment, and, you know, and like I said, you know, of all the people who could have justified it, he could have. He could have easily said, you know, what's the old saying, when in Rome? Be like a Roman. I got sold off. My family hates me. You know, I mean, it's not my bad. It's not my, I didn't come over here. I didn't seek employment over here.
But also he was born in the house.
But that's, yeah, everything's mine. Your wife's mine. Everything's mine. Yeah, I mean, it's like, so, and by the way, I mean, it's not like there was a local church that was keeping track of him. Who's keeping track of him? Do you think the Egyptians cared if he slept with Potiphar's wife? Actually, if you'll remember, I brought up the fact that culturally, during this dynasty, this period of time, that apparently they had some open relationship, that Pharaoh women were in power and they were doing things like this. So it would have been something really easy to go, who am I to question? You know, I mean, she's in power. Okay, oh, this is horrible. I have to have sex with this lady, you know. And who's going to go home and tell? No, nobody's going to tell. Every opportunity. And that's just the most glaring one. But he never compromised. And because he never compromised, he was victorious. And God kept blessing him. And God kept blessing him. And that's our message, is that stay faithful regardless of what's raging against you. God's plan is being fulfilled. And the evil that's attacking us and coming at us and trying to redirect us is actually turning into the betterment. That's the glory. Now, he's not going to send you messages and tell you and stuff like that. But looking at these stories is what I love about studying these characters, is how much you can look at them and go, that didn't stop. God is still the same God of all of his children.
And it wasn't instantaneous.
21-something years, yeah. All right, man, it was awesome. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week we will wrap it up, the ending of it, and Jacob and the family coming down. I hope you'll be able to join us Sunday morning at 9:45 for Bible study. We're with Paul. Paul's fixing to take off from Athens and head down to Corinth, that crazy, evil city. And in the morning, I'm going to look at the Songs of Moses and the Lamb. That's the title of my sermon Sunday morning. And then in the afternoon, we're going to look at chapter 2 of Zephaniah. So before we wrap up real quick, let me just offer a word of prayer. Our most gracious and loving Father, what a wonderful word that you have provided for us that we can enjoy and look at those that have been victorious in their faith. We pray that we'll be able to take the message tonight and make it a part of our lives and encourage ourselves in our struggles. Be with those who are with us tonight. Bless us. Guard us against the evil one. And we pray that we'll be able to be back together real soon. We ask all this in Christ's most holy name. Amen. Well, God bless. We'll see you.
It's okay to see you tonight.
I shouldn't,
You have to go
I
to
shouldn't
work right
forget
now.
to thank you.